Good afternoon, everyone. If people can come back to your seats, we're about to get started in about 1 minute. So if you can come back to your seats, particularly my moderators from the breakout groups, my plenary speakers, if y'all can be seated in the speakers area, I would appreciate it. 1 minute, y'all. 1 minute.
6 years.
I'm gonna get out of children. That's right. Hello, all. If folks can get seated, we're about to get started right now. So I want to really thank you all for all the powerful work that you just did in your breakout groups. It is not easy to go from mini panel to then small groups, to then 5 goals in 5 years. But, you know, on Black Brilliance Day, we try to be ambitious. We recognize that in creating strong communities, there's a role for all of us. And so thank you for leading and informing your conversations in small groups. We believe that this room is all full of leaders, and we wanted to make space for that. I'm now going to bring up Nikisha Lewis, a member of North Star Fund's Let Us Breathe Fund Grant-Making Committee, and Christine Parker, a North Star Fund board member with a critical message on how to support this work.
So Christine just asked me if I wanted the step stool. I'm gonna tippy toe instead. So how y'all doing? I see the crowd has thinned out a little bit from this morning, so thank y'all for sticking around and for being a part of these really important discussions. It's really, really critical that Black folks come together and talk through this stuff, and our allies and our comrades. So I'm really, really grateful to all of you for being here on today. As Ejera said, my name is Nikisha Lewis, and I have the absolute honor and privilege of sitting on the Let Us Breathe Fund Community Funding Committee. And so some of you know, if you've read the information in your packets, that we've made the first round of grants with the Let Us Breathe Fund, and we look forward to making another round. So for those of you who had not applied, please do so. But my role here this afternoon is to really talk to you about what's next, right? So how are we able to actually make these grants? And how it is that I really come to this work. So I'm a longtime practitioner in philanthropy. I've been in this work for almost a decade, but never in my life, never in my career have I felt so moved to fund Black organizing. And so I am so grateful. I am so incredibly grateful for the women, for the men, for the gender nonconforming folk, for the little people, for the young people who put their bodies, literally their bodies on the line to bring about our freedom. And so it is true liberation that we are looking to really fund in this moment, knowing that the movement is not reliant upon funders, but funders really get to step up. And all of us get to see ourselves as philanthropic change agents in this moment and beyond, recognizing that this is but a lasting moment in a long trajectory of movement building that our people have been a part of. Right, so we really want to really inspire you all based on the conversations you've been a part of, based on the testimonies you've heard, and the work that you know is forthcoming, to really figure out how you also can plug in and see yourself as a philanthropic practitioner. And specifically in this moment, to my philanthropic colleagues in the building, for those of you who have attachments to really large coffers, we ask that you too step up in this moment, right? And see yourself and see your foundation, see your family fund, whatever it is, however you come about those resources, see yourselves engaged in this work, both in this moment and beyond.
You made that easy. Thank you. As Nikisha said, I'm Christine Parker. I'm a relatively new member of the board. I've had the honor and the privilege to serve on the board for the past 18 months, and it's given me a chance to support North Star Fund's critical work in building and organizing and supporting grassroots movements here in New York to achieve lasting social, racial, and economic justice for all New Yorkers. And as Nikisha said, now that we're all gathered here, we need to invest more resources into these movements. This is the critical time to invest resources because we can make sure that these are not just moments of outrage, but movement building moments. And so to that end, we really need your help. As you've seen in our packets, we have already made $80,000 worth of donations to 8 organizations that are dedicated to this work, but we need to and we can and we should all do more. And you know, we are so grateful that you guys are all here today, myself as a board member, the North Star Fund, our partners, and I just ask that you give whatever you can give so that we can keep supporting these groups, you can keep supporting the groups that you know and that you admire, and you keep supporting these groups that are doing good work. And we're gonna try and make that as easy as possible for you. Go to the website, you can click and donate online. We've even given you envelopes here in your packets today. You can leave a check, you can use your credit card. But you know, now is the time to really sort of leverage the movement. And you know, we just ask that, you know, right now we think about investing in the racial justice movements here and now so that we can make the change that we've all been talking about today. Yeah. So thank you all so much, and we hope you enjoy the closing plenary.
Thank you all so much. We know that resourcing this work and resourcing Black-led organizing is a critical, critical need. We're now going to share some of the powerful, powerful work that you all were doing together. But before we do that, to share a bit of what happened in the art, culture, and healing justice breakout, and to kind of lead us in a collective activity, Imani Izuri.
All right, simple song. Some of you know it. When my hand is here, listen and learn it, and then when I go here, respond. Ain't gonna let nobody turn me around, turn me around, turn me around. Ain't gonna let nobody turn me around. I'm gonna keep on walking. keep on talking, marching up to freedom land. Ain't gonna let nobody turn me around, turn me around, turn me around. Ain't gonna let nobody turn me around. I'm gonna keep on walking. Okay, you got it now? Stand up, put your bags down, sing it like you know it, learn it so you can use it. Look at your neighbor. We're saying thank you for this gracious work. We honoring our ancestors by singing this song. Are y'all ready? One, and I want harmonies. I want some hand clapping and some foot stomping. 1, 2, 3. Ain't gonna let nobody turn me around. Look at your neighbors. Look. Turn me around. Turn me around. Ain't gonna let nobody turn me around. I'm gonna keep on walking. Hey, keep on talking. Hey, marching up the freedom land. Come one more time. Ain't gonna turn me around. Turn me around. Turn me around. Ain't gonna. Hey, keep on walking. Keep on walking. Keep on talking. Keep on walking. Keep on talking. Where we marching? Marching up to freedom land.
Again, Imani Zuri. That was powerful. That was inspiring. And to have more powerful work, y'all had the ambitious tasks to talk through critical issues impacting Black communities and the impact of anti-Black racism, and to create goals to support Black leaders in each of these issues. To present these goals, we have the brilliant Candace Tolliver, Sean Thomas Brightfeld, Piper Anderson, Tony Blackman, and Rob Robertson. If y'all can just join me on the stage. Have you first. We got Tony, then Candace, then Piper, then Sean.
Okay, so they're going to highlight our goals that we generated within our group on the screen. And see. All right, so with the Art, Culture, and Healing Justice group, we had a very powerful conversation. Imani led us in song. We had a beatboxer. We had a little cipher at the closing. It was hot, y'all. But there was also a lot of brilliance and a lot of light in our group and a lot of inspiration. And one of our first goals, we had about 30 and we had to narrow it down. This first one, creating intentional, intergenerational safe spaces to self-collectively identify trauma, engage, listen, and heal within our communities. Goal number 2, stand for something rather than against something. One of the ideas, and to explain this, was the way they did the Peace Parade in D.C., are to do something that deals with education reform, instead of always coming out saying what we're against, to actually say what we stand for. Goal number 3, fostering programs to educate and establish storytelling in the arts. Goal number 4, deepen, heighten, sharpen, collect, and fund the existing rituals and practices within our communities. And so tied to that, it would be that, in the collection process, we'd have to go around and find out what have we been doing to survive and sustain ourselves to be such a resilient people over the years. I thought that was powerful. And then number 5 is political education for healing justice. And I believe tied to that was to create an epic what was it? An epic arts group? An art squad. To create an epic art squad. So the idea was to get the best of the best, get the most powerful and insightful content, and create an epic art squad. So let us breathe.
And Candace Tolliver.
I have Ian Fuller who's going to help me, but I just wanted to talk to you a little bit about why we came together. I had the honor of moderating the Beyond Broken Windows plenary, where we talked about sort of our current system of policing that criminalizes Black people for very low-level minor offenses and how that impacts communities of color. But I'll bring Ian up to talk about sort of what we came up with for goals.
Fabulous. How's everyone doing today? Excellent. It is great to see so many beautiful people here. Okay, so goals for Beyond Broken Windows. So number one was connecting the dots between broken windows, policing to racial violence, and creating a national conversation and awareness. And then broken windows enabling radicalized policing. So moving away from that, obviously. Two, giving more power to the people, creating strategic solutions. Number three, making sure violations stay violations. Number four, building trust between police and community. Number five, becoming part of the political conversation. Number six, creating meetings at precincts, local elections, voting. Number seven, a focus on police hiring practices and criteria for hiring. Number eight, getting people out of the criminal justice system because they are not criminals. Number nine, changing perceptions of Black people in America. And then moving on to goals. So training for organizers, helping organizers look at multidimensional ways of attacking the problem to create solutions, mobilizing resources into those communities, much like what we're doing today with the Let Us Breathe Fund, creating diverse leadership, creating space for movement building, and thereafter the ability to grow and expand. I'd also add one last thing that I think hits to the crux of this, which for many of us is moving away from broken windows policing towards community wellness programs, and I'd like to see the shift around policing towards sustainable community building, community wellness in general. Thank you.
And now we have Piper Anderson with the Creating Community Safety breakout.
Thank you. Okay, so we have a much more extensive list than this, but these are just the six that we want to share with you right now. And the first thing I want to say is like one of the things that Farah Tanis offered to us at the start of our conversation was about the importance of bringing our whole selves to this work. And with that, who we come from, where we come from, right? Our ancestors, who we live for as well. So centering ourselves and grounding ourselves from there. And in that sense, recognizing the leadership of folks within our communities who are often made invisible and marginalized, but who have incredible strategies for how to create safety, particularly young people, trans people, cultural workers, healers, disabled folks, people who are surviving have survived both inside the criminal justice system and the disenfranchisement that comes from that. Two, the need to train community members to take on the role of providing safety and support. We talked a lot about the role of every single person in our community being an interventionist, being an active bystander, right? So showing up, bearing witness, and acting, right, to create safety for everyone. The need to fund and develop Black youth power, youth leadership. I stand here the result of an investment in Black leadership, Black youth leadership in the 90s and its early 2000s. We don't fund Black youth leadership anymore. There needs to be more young people sitting in these seats and up on the stage. We need to hold everyone accountable to intervene for community safety, and we need to train our folks in how to do that, because yes, when we are living inside of cycles of trauma, you can freeze up and feel like you can't intervene. And what does it mean for us to build that resilience is actually to stand up and actually to intervene and to support in a loving way and compassionate way everyone in our communities. And within that, recognizing that means that showing up for everyone, not just people that look like you. We need to treat violence like the public health issue that it is and not rely on police intervention to heal. Police intervention is not healing. So what are the healing kind of interventions that we can create? And we need overall economic empowerment for Black communities, and specifically we need to have Black-led organizations be able to be funded in a way that allows them to be autonomous, radical, and effective for sustainable change. So thank you.
Finally, Sean Thomas Brightfield, Economic Justice and Asset Building.
Hello. So the economic justice and asset building breakout was very packed. There were a lot of people there. We had a very full conversation. I had the privilege to moderate a conversation with Elisa Aguilera from Vocal New York, awQward from Drug Policy Alliance, Mo George from Community Voices Heard, Ama Kasa from African Communities Together, and Maxim Thorne from Yale University. So you get a sense of the diversity of views that were a part of that panel and discussion. So you'll see some of that reflected in the goals that came up through the breakout sessions that we had. So the first goal from the Economic Justice and Asset Building Group was to build strong communities with direct investments and local ownership that creates power and wealth and eliminates poverty, unemployment, and homelessness. Second goal, build assets and make sure people we elect do what they said they would do and that we have to hold them accountable. It was also that we would have the power to hold them accountable by having built these assets. Support leaders by providing community trainings, develop alternative and collective pathways to stabilize homeownership, and responsible understanding of other racial and cultural models to inclusive financing. Fourth goal was about participatory budgeting, supporting participatory budgeting, and creating a political review board throughout the electoral process. Fifth goal was about creating more spaces to have conversations like this Let Us Breathe forum in community, and having more leadership and outreach training so that community members could facilitate these conversations in community. And sixth goal, because 5 was too limiting, sixth goal was to encourage participatory and inclusive community engagement with Black communities on every level. That's city, state, federal as well, of decisions that affect our communities. Again, nothing about us without us.
And finally, Rob Robinson to discuss the open space breakout.
Thank you. Hey, hello. So I facilitated this along with Miriam Fogelson. We both serve on North Star Fund's Community Funding Committee. I'll be very honest, we had a broad conversation and we came up with more questions than answers. And I'll start out by saying the first one is, while we see direct action and civil disobedience as a tactic, what is the end goal? Somebody stated earlier that we're not good at putting together strategy and articulating what it is we want. I think we also articulated that in our group. We came to that very same conclusion, right? We're not good as a movement, and we need to get a little bit better at it. How do we harness the momentum around rallies and marches around Black Lives Matter and create long-term strategy that will create real change? How do we move beyond the same conversations with the same people? This is one that gets to me all the time. And how do we move on who are the right people and institutions to engage in these conversations? Is my brother's keeper really the policy group that we want in place thinking for us? It doesn't include us. I think the group before us just said nothing without us includes us, nothing without us, right? So there's a problem there. Should we be working with or within or dismantling existing institutions or systems? Often we talk about government. Does government necessarily work for us? Sometimes laws are created to work against us. However, it is the system that's in place. So we have to start thinking clearly about reformation versus transformation. And then why does change take so long? We don't engage in these conversations often, and we need to create space to have these types of conversations. Are we making progress or spinning our wheels as we look towards change? I'd like to close out. There's an old organization in this room that I used to work with, Picture the Homeless, that is working on community. that is working on community control over land, right? Trying to take land off the market and take it out of the hands of market forces and make it governed by the people. Syriza government in Greece has proposed taking guns away from police. What would the U.S. look like if the community controlled the police? Thank you.
Another hand to all of our breakout moderators. Thank you, guys. So, thank you guys. That was useful, inspiring, and I really hope that these goals have life far beyond this forum, that we bring them into our organizations, our families, our lives, that we use this moment as a catalyst. We're getting pretty far in our program, and I'm really, really thankful for people who are spending your Saturday here to have these crucial, critical conversations. So now we're going to our closing plenary, building, resourcing, and sustaining a Black-led movement. In these times, it's important to focus on the needs of Black communities, but it's also up to all people, regardless of race, gender, ethnicity, class, sexual orientation, to address anti-Black racism and to support Black leadership. We need to have support and resources and address the barriers of Black leaders doing this critical work. And there are particular challenges that impact Black leaders, Black movements, and Black-led organizations. I'm so excited to introduce Kevin Ryan from the New York Foundation to come up here and moderate our closing plenary and all of our closing plenary speakers. I also have one housekeeping announcement. There was a cane that was lost. It is a black metal cane, and there is the name Althea on it. If anyone has seen a cane or could help look, that would be really, really useful. Thank you. I dropped the mic.
Yeah. Somebody come sit here. Sit next to me. Sit next to me. You won't be first if you sit next to me. I promise. No, it'll be fine. I just thought we had to sit in order. No, that's okay. That's okay. No, it doesn't matter. Okay, folks. So we are going to get right into this conversation. We've talked a lot today about different strategies. We talked a lot today about different great work that's happening here in New York City to address all the different challenges that the breakout groups discuss even further. And so this last panel, we're going to talk about how to build and sustain a Black-led movement. So the panelists, you got a great panel here. Let me see down the line here. Mark, Eric, Cara, Jay, Monifa. We're going to start by just with the big opening framing questions, asking everybody they've thought about this question. You all have thought about it, so we want to make sure we have enough time so we can get to as many questions and comments as possible. So we're going to get right into it. I'm asking the question. I'll start with Mark at the end down there, and just asking the question, how do we sustain this? How do we build this movement, and how do we resource it?
Is this on? That's right. Well, I thought I was going last. So, okay, we have a lot to go, so I'll try to go very quickly. Again, my name is Mark Winston Griffith, and I want to sort of root what I have to say in, just so you know sort of what my experience has been and I guess kind of the limitations to that experience. I've been doing social justice work now as a professional for 30 years. And I've done that, I guess, 22 or 23 years an ED. Not to be confused with 12 years a slave, maybe actually, but 22 or 23 years as an executive director of different organizations. And right now I'm the executive director of the Brooklyn Movement Center and have been there for the last 3 years. And the Brooklyn Movement Center is a community organizing, multi-issue, membership-based organization based in Bedford-Stuyvesant in Crown Heights. So first, I want to, and also I've been on probably about a dozen boards over the last few years, over the last 30 years. So, I just want to acknowledge that there are a lot of different pathways to social change work. There obviously are nonprofit organizations that are doing this work, and we're going to be talking a lot about that. There are organizations that are not funded at all. There are organizations, and there's a lot of movement work that is going on completely outside of organizations as well. And I think it's important for us to acknowledge that. And it's also important to acknowledge that there is an unreconcilable contradiction between self-determination and this idea of being an organization that is receiving foundation funding. The two, again, have just some inherent contradictions. So, about 12 or 13 years ago, I wrote a piece, an article called Black Organizer Blues. And, it was my attempt to sort of vent some frustrations, but actually do some reporting on what black organizers were feeling in New York City. And one of the main points I was trying to make, something that I think Monifa is going to be talking about later on as well, is just how black organizing that is done in black communities is in many ways very different from what is considered to be traditional white-led organizing and Saul Alinsky-based organizing, and yet many of the funders were thinking of us through that old traditional way, and that it did not fit the work that we were doing. And it was also just, recognizing the challenges that black organizers and black organizations go through. So first, I want to give some props to Kevin and the New York Foundation, because Kevin has been looking at these issues for years now, and really trying to think about how do you support black organizing, and thinking of it as a very distinct discipline. There was an event that was held last night that was part of this. Some of you in the room were there, and there were about 30, I would say, organizers in the room, and we were there to just sort of meet each other and to work on strategies together. And I would say that the vast majority of folks there were 35 years and younger, which I think is great. I was probably among the 2 or 3 oldest people in the room, and one of my takeaways from that is that I think that many of us who have been in this game, or folks of my generation or my age, we just haven't made it this far, as far as still being in the organizing game, still as organizers, still as executive directors. And I think about how little, I have to show in terms of my own financial security over the last 30 years, how little I have in terms of, or how no money I have in terms of retirement, how difficult it will be for me to educate my children. And I think that's something that all of us are in this movement have to struggle with. And at some point in time have to figure out, are we going to stay in this? Because can we sustain us? Forget the organization. Well, I shouldn't say forget the organization, but the organization aside, can we sustain ourselves individually? Over the last 20 years, there have been organizations like the National Organizers Alliance. In New York, you had the Organizing Support Center. And those organizations are gone. And they supported not only black organizing, but organizing in general. And then you had, social justice leadership, which is not in the same form anymore. So Let Us Breathe, and the Let Us Breathe Fund, for those of you who don't know, is funding black-led organizing, is unique in what it's trying to do, and very much alone. And there needs to be more of it. But it also brings up some very uneasy questions about, again, this contradiction. The fact that Let Us Breathe is a mostly foundation and white-funded fund supporting black-led organizing, and so we've got to deal with some of that. But it should be no surprise how few how little black organizing is getting funded these days. Most of the funding is going to bigger organizations, not grassroots organizing. There's an emphasis on campaigns as opposed to base building. There's an emphasis on one issue as opposed to multi-issue organizing. And a lot of the money ends up going through intermediaries as opposed to organizations that are doing work on the ground. And even most of the organizations that are supporting our work are small and struggling foundations themselves. So obviously we have to exploit this moment. because, black people are not going to be sexy, and black organizing is not going to be sexy for very long. We know that. And so what we have to do is, again, we have to take advantage of this moment, but we also, as black people and as black organizers, we have to raise the value proposition of organizing among black people. That is, it has to be seen as just as important as direct service, as advocacy, and all the other different forms of organizations that are doing work in our organizations. And right now, that is not the case. And we have to make the distinction between activism and sustained community building and base building work. Understanding that both are equally important, but they are different enterprises. And we are all familiar with the nonprofit industrial complex, and we know that we're beholden to capitalist interests, and we're not going to deliver the revolution through our organizations, and our one organization does not a movement make. But we do have to understand that community-based organizations and organizing groups, the important role that they play in terms of building infrastructure, in terms of politicizing, in terms of training, in terms of building a leadership pipeline so that there is a standing army when shit pops off. We also have to build that bridge between local interest and policies and structural reform. So, obviously we have to, at some point in time, try to break the chains of foundation support. And by doing, the way to do this is through individual giving and membership. Understanding that as you bring people into the organization, they are not clients, they are not recipients of some service you're providing, they are stakeholders. And they have to come in, we have to come in as stakeholders, not only with our sweat equity, but with our financial equity as well. And we have to go to individuals to look for their support as well. And we have to change the culture within black neighborhoods as well, because we know that black middle class and progressives, that we know that they give money, but they're not giving to social justice organizations. They're giving to elected officials, to churches, to mosques, to charities, which is all fine. But again, we have to lift up the primacy and the importance of social justice organizing and social justice organizations. And we also obviously have to do a lot in terms of building out solidarity support, understanding that white folks have a role in this movement. There is financial support and other support that they can build, and understanding their role in all of that. And lastly, I'll say that we cannot let foundations off the hook. I will say that some of my best friends work for foundations. But I think we've accepted this notion that foundations are not accountable, and there's no way to hold them into account. I think we have to begin to reject that notion. We have to, as organizers, we have to organize. And we have to reject this notion that we don't have any power in that equation. And we have to challenge foundations in a very strategic way. We can't do it individually. We have to do it collectively. We have to put our foot up their behinds as well as up the foot of the behinds of corporate interests that we're fighting as well. So with that, I'm going to step to the side and ask that you join me in that challenge. Oh, that's what you look like. Challenge, ask that you step with me in challenging foundations to support the work that we're doing in the way that I was just describing. Peace.
So, Eric, let's after that stirring presentation by Mark, let's talk about it from the foundation side. How can we build and sustain and support Black-led organizing and movement work?
I got this. All right. So first, I just want to give respect for those who have walked before me. those who I get to walk with presently and those who will walk after us. It's an incredible moment, and it's a moment that I actually didn't think I would see in my lifetime, and much respect to all those who sustain themselves in the streets of Ferguson, Baltimore, New York, Cleveland. I just want to say much love to you all. So let's talk about philanthropy, right? And I want to talk about philanthropy by first talking about movements. Movements are complex, right? And the best movements are those movements that can actually hold both their diversity and their contradictions, right? We've seen this through history, whether we're talking about the civil rights movement or the Black Power movement, the debates that raged throughout those movements and will continue to rage, hopefully today, about what is to be done, what is the best course of action. And what we have to understand, and I'm going to throw these out here and then we'll let other folks speak and then we'll get to questions and comments. But what I want to encourage people to understand is, as we look at philanthropy, to look at philanthropy through the lens of movement building. Philanthropy is its own animal in America and has a long history, right? I work for the Ford Foundation, which is one of the few handful of social justice foundations, private foundations in the U.S. Honestly, there are about a couple of dozen strong social justice foundations, social change foundations in the United States. And I like to compare that to the thousands of private foundations that exist that don't do advocacy, don't do social change. And I only mention that to just put it in a perspective that we're talking about a small grouping of philanthropy. So how do we shape private philanthropy that is sympathetic to social change and social advocacy? And then how do we attempt to change the culture of larger philanthropy? You do it simply, I believe, through two paths. The first is you continue your movement building. If you believe that you have impact on the state, that you have impact on institutions of government, right? NGOs, nonprofits, if you believe that you influence how your neighbors and people in this room think through your actions, you will also continue to influence philanthropy. Philanthropy has already begun to respond to the movement that's been building. My sense is this: if you want philanthropy to pivot, continue to turn up the heat. If you want philanthropy to be responsive, continue to build your leadership. That is what will change the culture of philanthropy ultimately. I want to speak specifically. In engaging philanthropy, we have to be very smart. And we have to be smart in this way, that we need to recognize the reality that philanthropy in the large sense has not been supportive of Black-led organizing. And in those moments that it has, it's mainly been for short doses of time. New Orleans, the aftermath of Katrina, is an example of that. Very few foundations, national private foundations, remained on the ground in New Orleans less than 3 years after Hurricane Katrina. Those foundations that did were mostly foundations that were committed to social change advocacy, or those foundations that were committed to transforming in New Orleans in ways that perhaps were not people-centered. For us moving forward, we need to realize, how do we build our own power so that we can have honest conversations with philanthropy? I believe that one goal is by building individual donors. Individual donors are committed. It means that as a movement, we have to stay attuned and in conversation with these individuals who are giving us money, providing us support. These dollars tend to be more powerful because they come with less strings, even if they're not the size of a large foundation. And what it means is it signals that we have legitimacy within our own communities. Individual donor dollars are power. What they mean is movement building. And looking at the Let Us Breathe Fund, for an example, is one clear example how each of us in this moment can step up visibly and give a signal about where we stand in this moment. Resource Generation, who has raised nearly $1 million, right, that they have pledged to go to Black organizing, Black-led organizing here in the United States, is another example, right? It's phenomenal. Funders, right, will continue to play a role. I'm committed to these issues. I'm also being pushed by others in philanthropy and folks out in the field every time that they speak truth to power. Use your voices. Blacks in philanthropy are also beginning to step up. A funder's pledge has been released. You can find it on the APFE website, Association of Black Foundation Executives at apfe.org. And we're asking African American and Black philanthropists to sign a pledge, making a commitment to one another that we will figure out how we open space in philanthropy to talk about both Black-led organizing and racial justice. This moment is so crucial, and I think about it this way as I come to an end. We used to play this game when I was little, right? I would have. That's what we called it, right? And usually a bunch of us would sit around and say, I would have in the midst of a zombie invasion, right? Or I would have, right, if my ship had been attacked by pirates, right? And the one that people would always talk about is I would have during the Civil Rights Movement, or I would have in 1965 in the streets of Oakland, right? Now, decades later, what I've come to realize is really what I would have done marching in Selma or standing in the street of Oakland is likely what I'm doing right now, right? This is our moment, regardless of race. This is ultimately the battle between white supremacy and being a human being. It's that fundamental. Regardless of race, class, religion, we are at a point where we either believe something is fundamentally wrong with Black people to have to live in these conditions, or there is a structure called white supremacy that seeks to stamp out humanity of both its victims and those who it cons into believing that this is a world we should live in. This is our moment. And how we have this moment is by holding our contradictions and being honest about them, embracing our tensions and challenging one another to find the way forward. Ultimately, this is about Blackness as central to the deconstruction of white supremacy in America, and it is the way that all of us will get free. So let's get free.
So, Cara, it's getting harder to follow here because they're laying it down, but I'm going to pass it on to you. I know you can do it. So, how do we build support for resources and leaders?
Okay, I'll do my best. All right. Good afternoon, everyone. Yeah, I'm probably going to take it a little bit in a different direction. I guess what I want to say is that funders, donors, ourselves need to fund Black radical traditions of liberation. We need to go beyond just funding movements, but fund the political practices that we've all been a part of. And I do want to call to the ancestors and name some names so that we understand we're part of an integral legacy of political radical tradition. The tradition of 4 key elements is what I'm going to talk about today of Black radical resistance. And this is based on my formula. I don't think it's been tweeted. It's just what I was thinking about. I call it my recipe for freedom. I am going to take some poetic license. 4 points: radical creation and dreaming. How do we generate resources for radical creation and dreaming? How do we generate resources for giving memory and witnessing our survival? How do we give resources towards bringing testimony? And how do we give resources towards building action and leadership? I want to talk a little bit about what that's looked like. And I do want to name that I'm here in the spirit and the honor of Audre Lorde. Yes. I have the honor, dignity, and pleasure to work in her name at the Audre Lorde Project, a lesbian, gay, bi, two-spirit, trans, gender nonconforming people of color organizing center in New York City that's about to be 20 years old. And we work, we love in partnership with many other organizations in solidarity and within our communities, especially Fierce, Streetwise and Safe, and Sylvia Rivera Law Project. Thank you. So I just want to call us out. Inside of this, I want to call on the leadership of Black queer women, Black trans women, specifically that we get more marginalized within the power and oppressive structures that are designed for us to live and work in. I want to call on our radical traditions of movements and practices and traditions rooted in resistance, from slavery uprisings to the Black Power movement, to the Black Panther movement, to the Civil Rights movement, to the Black feminist movement, to the Stonewall uprising, to Black Lives Matter, and the many more we cannot name. We don't have time. Yes. All right, let me get me through. I want to call on our ancestors, Harriet Tubman, Sojourner Truth, who were not just placeholders for freedom, but actual architects of resistance from slavery. I want to honor Ella Baker and Bayard Rustin, among so many, who were the leaders. Many have named Bayard. Let's name Ella Baker too, and their leadership and understanding of tradition, of history, and of future, as they too were architects. I want to call on the Marlon Riggses, Essex Hemphills, Audre Lordes, James Baldwins, and Tony K. Bambaras. And there are many more, right, that we can't name now, we don't have time, who have had the courage to witness, as I said, witness and testimony, give testimony to the memory of our lives, and understand what it means as a role to document and witness, to bring light to the cages that we're living in as oppressed Black folks with the shadow of genocide in our hearts, killing us from heart disease, diabetes, HIV, AIDS, convincing us that it's our fault and that they're not conditions of trauma. That we ourselves can transform our vision and ask us ourselves to remember, because we are finding evidence and witnessing and testifying to the continued denigration and killing of our Black bodies. I want to bring attention to the architects of Black feminism that carved a bridge for freedom, that gender and sexuality are intrinsically a part of Blackness. Black feminism lives. Yes? To my people at Insight, I need to say it again. Black feminism lives, right? In an economy of violence that thrives on the fearing, hunting, and killing of Black men, I want to speak to the persecution of Black women and Black queer and trans bodies that have been fighting for our lives within white supremacy and inside of our own misogynist and homophobic Black communities to dare to survive. Right here in the state of New York, the Combahee River Collective Statement in 1975 was created by Black lesbians that changed the face of Black freedom by saying our queerness, our female bodies are inside of a Black liberation frame. I want to quote them, and if you don't know what I'm talking about, the Combahee River Collective is a critical piece to Black feminist history. If you don't know it, you need to know it. A quote from it says, above all else, quote, our politics initially sprang from the shared belief that Black women are inherently valuable, that our liberation is a necessity, not as an adjunct to somebody else's, but as that for our autonomy, it is apparent that no other ostensible progressive movement has ever considered our specific oppression as a priority or worked seriously for the ending of our oppression. So I'm just giving placement that, again, what did I say? Black radical traditions, much larger than movements. This is part of how we have been resilient since attempted genocide and slavery. And when we speak to the possibilities of this moment, and there are so many moments, how do we use our imagination and transformation to witness and bring memory to the actions that manifest what we need to do for our livelihood? We need the space and resources to generate what we already know. We need people to trust that we know how to do it, that we know how to organize from slavery to now, that we know how to center spirit, that we know how to center ancestors, that we know our cultural work, we know how to build freedom marches and freedom songs, and that our survival has relied on setting our course, setting a path that cannot be measured by traditional ways of funding. It cannot be measured by traditional ways of organizing. Our impact is to know that we survived another day with a target on our backs. The question of leadership in this moment is that we need more resources to center Black-led work so that we can value and pay our Black mentors. How are we paying and resourcing our Black elders for having lived history in their bones? How can we value survival and lived experience as a job and sustain community members as community historians, community archivists, and memory workers? We need funds to digitally archive our memories of liberation. Audre Lorde Project needs to digitally archive 20 years of existence. We need to remember Miss Major, Marsha P. Johnson, a Black trans woman in New York, who understood that living on the street and survival was part of liberation for all of our fights. We need Black, queer, and trans leadership that is elevated and paid for, not exploited, who is training as we train each other as Black, queer, trans, gender nonconforming people of color, leadership that is critical to our survival. We need more funding and generative support to build our political spaces that honor and allow us to build our leadership and build onto each other's legacies. We need the funds to generate our collective healing, our collective testimonials, and to define our own legacies. And if we are able to generate resources that lift up our mentors like Miss Major, if we do not have enough to pay for them to sleep well, to eat well, and transport wherever they want to go well, then we are not doing this well. To our allied institutions, where do you draw the line of Black leadership? How are you truly elevating Black leadership in your organizations, your neighborhoods, and communities? Who are you training to hold budgets and fundraising? Who are you training to know the numbers beyond knowing how to just do the program curriculum? To other people of color, how do we elevate each other with competing within a white supremacist frame that honors and values the virtue of our collective leadership? And I'll end with, this is a political moment inside of any moments inside the radical Black tradition of our survival. And in the words of Assata Shakur, it is our duty to protect and love each other. It is our duty to protect and love each other. It is our duty to protect and love each other.
Okay, good night, everybody. We're building. We're building. No, we're building. We are building. So, Jay.
Okay, so.
Let's keep building.
So who wants to go after that? But I guess I have to go anyway. Yes. All right. So for me, when I think about the question of how do we sustain these movements or all these pieces, for me, selfishly as an artist, it's about how do we preserve Black art, right? So for me, when I think about the artists, it's to me that in many ways we're preserving history, right? So how do we preserve the music of this movement? How do we preserve what's actually happening on the ground? And a lot of times I think that is through the movement, is helpful to the movement, as well as something that Cara and a few other folks on the panel have said. It also provides imagination for the movement, right? So it's those creative thinkers that allow these things to happen, allow us to create and make a new type of world. I have the privilege of founding an organization called awQward, which is the first ever organization that specifically seeks to uplift the work of trans and queer performers and educators of color. It is also a very intentionally all-trans administrative team that does this work, right? And I say that to say that even within this movement, we have to make sure that we are focusing often on the most marginalized in these communities, right? So when we're talking about trans folks of color, that regardless, even within many LGBTQ Black organizations, we get left behind, right? So when you look at who is in charge of organizations, who gets places in leadership, oftentimes we're taught to fend for ourselves or to wait and hope that one day other organizations will recognize our humanity and want us to be a part. And so what I'm asking for everyone in this room is to think about how do we center trans people of color and specifically trans women of color in our work, right? Because if we're not doing that, we're actually not going to the fire of the issue, right? So sometimes we're just going to the smoke and seeing what happens up here. But if we're looking at most trans people in this country have a life expectancy under 40, it is even lower if you're a person of color who is trans. It is even lower if you're a trans woman of color in this country, your life expectancy is 34 years old, okay? So this is not, some hypothetical conversation, but how do we really reshift this narrative so that not only do we get to sustain our work financially, but how do we get to live, right? So when do trans people of color get to be in situations where we get to live long, fulfilling lives in that way? So I ask for solidarity from many of my cis Black counterparts that are in this room. For me, in the idea of why we specifically created that intentional space of having all trans leadership, we want to make sure, again, that we have those possibility models for each other as well as to others in the movement that, yes, this is possible. When we talk about funding and what that looks like, going back to what Mark said before, as people as Black folks that run organizations, are most of us rich? Probably not. Are most of us having these big budgets? Probably not. And even with our tiny little budget, what we've been very intentional about, even knowing that we're an organization that's not, again, just supporting only trans people, but again, trying to be very intentional that we want to prioritize trans voices and trans lives. We try to even provide small monthly grants for trans artists of color, very much also intentionally trying to make sure that we center trans women of color when we do our giving. And so I think going back to what does it look like to get money from foundations, what does it look like to get money from granting bodies, that we don't force people to give us long sob stories about why they need money, right? So if someone sends us a sentence, it says, hey, I can't pay my rent this month, can y'all help? If we got money in our bank account, it goes to that person directly, immediately. Like, how do we get this to you electronically today? Because we don't want you to have to worry. We don't want you to have to plead with people like your life is important to us. Period. When I think about solidarity from my non-Black allies, right, and what that means, and I kind of have a little problem with the word ally, but I'm not going to get into all that right now because I know we only have a little bit of time. But I just want to tell two quick stories. So my organization has been up and running since October. We're very, 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 very new, right? Even though a lot of the work that I have been doing and we have been doing collectively has been informal for a while, one of the things that I noticed is how much solidarity work can take resources from actual organizations, right? So about when we first sort of got off the ground, we had a very wonderful organization who was this very white-centered organization, multi-million-dollar company, sees something that we write about our organization, calls me up one day and says, hey, look at all the stuff that's happening in this country. We know what you're talking about. We know what you're thinking about. And we know that we as a white cis-run organization don't need to be the face of queer art right now, right? We're going to divert a lot of our resources to you. We're going to divert a lot of our resources to what you're doing, all this stuff on the ground. So as a tiny ass organization with a little budget, when someone says, I'm going to write you a check for $100,000, right? That means a lot. That's meaningful, right? What ended up happening is end up having all these meetings with this organization. All these meetings with people. I got my team, my little bit team that's got a little bit of funding to pay their paychecks, doing stuff, diverting all this time and energy to people that want to be in solidarity with us. At the end of the day, it took months, that check never came. Check never came, right? But we wasted thousands of dollars of administrative time and energy and effort trying to work with people who wanted to be educated, trying to work with people that wanted to supposedly pour into the movement, but at the end of the day, thought it was too risky, right? And so what I ask for people, right, is to think about when we say we're showing up for solidarity, how are we not just stealing from organizations with a little bit of time and resources, but how are we actually just pouring into? And so My only thing is I love people in solidarity with me that know what the mission is. If what they can do is money, they can put that check on the table, and they know that they don't have to be in charge of where it goes because they know we'll do the right thing, right? We know we'll do what we need to do for our people, right? Or if it's time, whatever it is, right? So vice versa, I have folks in solidarity with us right now who I have a person doesn't have a lot of money in her paycheck every month, right? Is a non-black person, wants to be in solidarity. What she gets from her job every month is advertising credits on Facebook. That's what she can do. Every month, I send her a list of things I want updated, or a list of things, and that's it. There's no conversation. There's no long, drawn-out meetings. That is simply it, and that's what she can provide, and I appreciate it, and I appreciate her, and she doesn't take any time away from our organization. We get to keep doing what we're doing without having to rationalize to a non-black person why this particular thing is important to black people, right? And so I'm going to keep this short because I know we're going to have some questions and things like that, but those are the things that have been on my mind, so thank y'all for having me here.
Excuse me. All right, Monifa. So it's kind of great that you're sort of bookending Mark here, because I over the years a lot of conversations that I've had with the two of you have been about this particular issue. So I'm really anxious to hear your thoughts about this.
Thank you. First of all, I wanted to say that I was up here thinking, like, I keep getting these chills. Like, is it cold or whatever? But now I realize that there's like a heavy, heavy ancestor presence here. And as my sister was calling on all those ancestors from Audre Lorde all the way back to Harriet Tubman, it was like the air really started to blow. And I was like, oh, okay, that's what's going on in here. And so it reminded me to open up and talk about my own personal mentors in this. I definitely want to bring into the room, because he's already in the room, Richie Perez, who is really the father of Communities United for Police Reform, and my own personal mentor, and another personal mentor and a founder of the Malcolm X Grassroots movement, Chokwe Lumumba. So don't we feel all of them up in here? They're all in here. And it just feels powerful. It's been said throughout the day that in order to build movements for justice that are successful, people with a front row seat to those injustices have to be at the center, have to be in the leadership in a meaningful way. So the question is, how does that happen? How can under-resourced organizations that are they're right in the crosshairs, facing the fire, still participate in a meaningful way in the leadership of creating all those campaigns and all the pieces of the movement that have to exist to break those things down, right? It's like you really have to be what Stacey Patton, if any of y'all follow her on Facebook, called. She says, I got to be the patient and the doctor, right? So I have to teach you about my issue and fight for my issue at the same time, and almost split ourselves in two. We have to get resources in, and we have to kind of redefine what some of the metrics are, and in my opinion, that philanthropy looks at. One, absolutely, there must be base building. We have to build power. And in order for those organizations to participate in a meaningful way, they have to build their power. They have to consolidate their base. But that doesn't always look like what you may think it looks like. In our communities, there are organizations, be them faith, be that, all social service organizations that can have a huge base. Could be a lot of people involved. And then you could also have a group of small yet strategic people, which is actually a stronger base because of their commitment and their will and their dedication to the community they are in to change. So when you come as a foundation and you're looking for people to describe their base and you want to quantify it based on things like size, numbers of years, I think that it's on us, but also on the funders to really complicate and sophisticate this idea of base. And when you're looking at leadership as well. I like to take a page out of social media. I am not a millennial, but I spend a lot of time around some, right? And we measure things, there's reach, there's impressions, and there's influence. Right? And it's a complicated metric that I think really applies to what's going on in our communities, because there are folks and then there's folks. So I got a quick story, which is about a month ago, many high schools all over the country were walking out of school, and so is my daughter's high school. So they're sitting in the school one day, and a high school 4 blocks from them that's close to the Brooklyn Bridge all walked out of their school, marched to her school, and started yelling at the tops of their voices in front of her high school, "Turn up, don't turn down, we're doing this for Mike Brown." Totally unplanned high school walk-up via text message and via Snapchat. Who's on Snapchat? Does anybody know about that? Okay. And so they're looking around their school for leadership, right? So in the school, there's what? There's student leaders who were elected, the student government. And they're also looking around, there's the teachers, right? And there's people who belong to different clubs. But the students that all of the students were looking to is a handful of juniors and seniors that don't have any titles, that when they got up and walked up, that whole school got up behind them and walked out. Who knows who the leadership is in the school? You got to talk to the kids in the school.
Yeah. Yep.
You may come to the school and say, "Who's the student body president?" But they're not walking out behind the student body president. Y'all understand what I'm saying? Okay, so that's my story on base and leadership, and authentic leadership looks different within a different context. You got to have the people in there. And then I'm really glad that Mark mentioned the intermediaries, because what we're finding that as grassroots organizations working on local issues is that everything now is coming through these intermediaries, right? The intermediary has to be based on the same principles and values as the organizations they're trying to fund. The intermediaries need to look like us. They need to have a front row view to the injustices. That's the type of national network that the monies for our organizations need to come through. And some are doing it well. You have places like the Praxis Project is doing some stuff, Groundswell Fund is doing some stuff, and we want to give props. But that's what, if your money is coming through a group, that group also needs to understand what's happening in the community. And so finally, I wanted to say, talk about resources beyond money. Like, oop, did she say that? No, yes, we do also want money. But there's other types of resources, especially when we're in the fire of the moment that we're in right now. And that is the resource of having our backs. When elected leaders or the media are calling our direct actions thuggery, then where are you, philanthropists? Where are you, major donors? The voices are a level of resources as well. Organizations and radical black organizers don't want to be treated like the proverbial side chick. Claim this work. Claim what we're doing and say, we fund organizing, we fund social justice, and that's what it looks like. And I trust that leadership, and I stand behind what they're doing.
So I'm not saying nothing. It's question time, question and answer time. So if you have a question, the mics are set up. Please head over to the mics. In the meantime, I'm going to ask the panel. So you all heard a lot from each other. Did anybody have anything they wanted to say in response to anything you've heard?
I want to hear.
Yeah. Don't be shy. Head up to the microphone.
I just wanted to lift up one thing. Yeah. Maybe it's an echo chamber between Monifa and I, but the idea of base building, because I really do think that foundations oftentimes overlook the quality of the relationships that people have. Yes. The fact that, you know, this idea of organizing is that you knock on someone's door and, you know, you sort of bring them into something that you already got your agenda in mind, and you're bringing them into it. And that's not how we practice business. We build relationships over a period of time. There's a certain level of trust that we build, and the issues are ultimately defined by our membership. And what you see oftentimes in organizing is puppetry, I should say, is where organizations establish an agenda, and the people are the props, and is oftentimes the grassroots organizers who are like charged with going out and...
Thank you to North Star Fund for this excellent forum. Thank you. Merci beaucoup. Mucho gracias. Really have a wonderful time. I feel freedom here. Really feel it today is wonderful. But also, I would like to know, do you know, while we are doing this movement, this is a divine movement, and I would like to say this is a divine movement. This is a Black liberation movement. Whether you like it or not, you cannot stop it. This is our time, and we will return to our glory. Whether you like it or not, we will return to our glory. And I would like to know, thank you, and I would like to know if, there's informant and infiltrators, spy. Do we take those in considerations as we working or building that movement? There could be politicians, there could be non-profit organizations, there could be people, how we really putting structures to really, move forward with that movement against distractions, against those infiltrators.
Great, thank you. So, panelists?
Well, I want to thank you for giving thanks, and also as far as dealing with people who don't have our best interests in mind, who we may not know about. My father came out of the Black Panther Party, and they dealt a lot with issues like that. And one of the things he always said is that, you got to keep your friends close, keep your enemies closer. And you never know when someone may be an enemy in 1 minute and a friend in another. And a lot of people think that, and this is a lesson they learned, that, there's infiltrators, there's people who are put in place to infiltrate and disrupt your organization, but there were also people who weren't that, and then were, turned on the organization because of various things, and that's a whole nother panel. But a lot of times we look at who were testified on behalf of the government against people and created political prisoners. About half of those people weren't spies to begin with either. So we got to really think about all the different ways that. And then the other thing I wanted to say is that philanthropists need to learn from those who've done it right. And if people don't know, Harry Belafonte helped to basically fund a lot of what we uphold. And so I think there's a lot of organizing and education that philanthropists can do with other philanthropists that have done it right. And I just throw him out there as a resource.
So, I would say a couple. There are truths, right? So, truths, government suppression happens. It's document, COINTELPRO, happen. Will governments, corporations, other interests attempt to infiltrate and divide movements? Absolutely. Any movement of worth will have that happen. You can spend time, you can create a hyper-security culture, but I actually would advise against that. I think that plays, it isolates a movement. It creates a subculture rather than a counterculture movement, right? And so I tell people, yes, we have to recognize that these things happen, but the way that we protect movements is by building bonds and movements that hold contradictions and tensions so that those wedges are not used against individuals and against leaders and against the communities. And so the way you defend a movement, folks will know this in the movement for Black Lives, my pet peeve is that people don't get enough sleep, right? And you'll hear me say this as a wellness moment right now. So COINTELPRO, absolutely. It was destructive. It targeted individuals. It set people up for murder, for beatings. This was a real thing. And as Black leadership, we have to be responsible enough in asserting our own leadership to understand that creating a movement culture that rewards fatigue, you cannot think well if you are fatigued. You are not making good decisions. You have become vulnerable. A movement built on misogyny, on homophobia, makes us vulnerable. Transphobia makes us vulnerable. Not honoring those who are most vulnerable in our communities make us vulnerable to suppression and infiltration. The things that make us most vulnerable are actually the things that we can use our own leadership to strengthen our movement. I really believe this. And so I don't want to take away that these things happen, but I want to put it in a context of things that we can actually do to make a difference. And has Assata Shakur, I just want to reuse that quote, right? To protect and love ourselves is the best defense that we have against government suppression. Right.
I know there's more questions. I just want to add that I think it's also politically important to define what wellness and safety means as an organizing strategy. So I know at the Audre Lorde Project, and I know many folks in this room that we honor, that exactly what you're speaking to is like, how do we define wellness and safety, and what does that look like, and where are we able to put our bodies on the line or not, or put our minds on the line or not, and understand what level of vulnerability and risk different people can take based on how they are arriving.
So I want to direct a question to Mark. Excuse me. Mark, you said something that resonated with me, and that's the reliance on philanthropy. Mm-hmm. So help me imagine a world, because it's something I talk about a lot. It's something we've experienced in Take Back the Land, being a Black-led movement, and couldn't engage philanthropy in our work. What does that world look like? Tell me what it looks like. How do we move away from our reliance on philanthropy to do social justice work? How do we ensure a good life? You spent 23 years as an ED. How do you ensure that you have a great future for your children? I know it's a big question mark, but touch on that a little bit for me. Because I really think I struggle as you try to engage people and say, this is a reality we're going to have to face. How do we move forward?
No, it's a good question. And, you know, I've gotten so crotchety on this issue over the last few years. People, I think, sort of don't want to hear me talk about it anymore.
I hear you, brother.
And, you know, and I have to challenge myself. I have to question myself. It's like, I've been complaining about certain things for such a long time, so why am I still doing it? And I don't know if I have a good answer to that. But in terms of what this looks like, it's some of what I talked about before. So, for instance, our organization, which is just 3 years old, about 80% of our funding comes from foundations. About 20% comes from our members and individual donors. So in my world, that script is flipped, so that the majority of our support comes from the people that we're working among and other solidarity individuals. Because, you know, there's this, I keep always say it, you know, it may be the devil or it may be the Lord, but you always have to serve somebody. And so who you need to be serving is linked to who you're getting the money from. And so if the money is coming from your membership and from other individuals around you who are in solidarity with you, then that is a built-in accountability system that will make sure you're on point, as opposed to where it is now, where, you know, let's be real. When we receive so much foundation dollars, we have no choice but to chase their agenda and to fit into what they say is fundable. As much as we like to say that we don't do that, that inevitably happens. That mission creep inevitably happens. And I can't, you know, we try to minimize that as much as possible, but that's the case. So if your vision, the vision I would like to talk about is where 80% of my funders look like my neighborhood, look like my community, look like the people that I'm working with.
Thank you.
And if I could add to that, I also think it's understanding philanthropy as a mechanism to transform the racial gender wealth divide. And how are we really understanding generating resources? And I do think it's beyond dollars. It's like, it's what you said. It's like skills. It's, you know, however we're thinking about generating. It's like getting outside these capitalist ideas of what it means to support each other's work, but also understanding this has been designed this way for us to be divided this way, and to understand philanthropy as a political tool and an opportunity for us to change how we are relating to each other. I mean, again, I go back to imagination and dream and action. I don't think I'm dreaming this. Like, I do believe there are ways that we can think about cooperative models, exchange, barter models and get outside of ourselves and not always relying on this linear idea of you give, I take, you save, I'm saved, not interested.
Can we, just real quick, I want to take these, we only have a few minutes left, so I want to take these last 3 questions over here, and then the panelists can finish with Rob's question or answer any of these questions that come up. So let's get these last 3 questions.
Thank you. So I was at an event last December that talked about these similar themes, and there were different panels that were there. The difference is that was led by the Christian pastors within, particularly the Brooklyn community. And so it was, for me, it was an interesting experience too, because I was a little bit outside my mode being there. But one thing that came up that struck me was that if you look at all of the Black communities within America, about $1.2 billion is given annually to Black churches. And the question came up, well, why can't we give some of that to support Black-led organizations? Like, if we just took 5% of that, that would be $50 million. I mean, so I think that even here, and I know it's come up a few times, where, how important is that partnership with Black churches, and, and having pastors here that actually support that thought process and can really help influence other faith-based leaders to help support
cross-racial solidarity. And I just wanted to get your thoughts, because as a member of the first generation, of being a first-generation South Asian American, oftentimes within my own community, I'm directly faced with a lot of anti-Black racism. So how is it that we get people to recognize their privilege so that we can build these bridges and really build this needed movement? Thanks.
So Eric Ward got me to thinking about the fact that obviously philanthropy will not seed the revolution, and I think we can all acknowledge that. But there is a paradigm around the fact that we think that all philanthropy is doing is giving. But we as citizens in this country have given them something, and that is a tax status that allows them to operate the way that they do. And to me, it becomes about the policies that we put in place that change the relationship, whether it's about who's on the staffs of those organizations, how transparent they must be about who they're giving to, all this intermediary stuff. Why isn't that broken out and regulated and demanded in terms of information? If they are not going to be transformed, then they do not deserve that tax status. And so I believe that's a part of the paradigm of sustaining our organizations that we need to talk about. And the other point that I wanted to bring up and get a response to was, yes, there are things beyond resources, and I totally appreciated Monifa saying that. I totally appreciated some of the other things Cara and others on the panel said. One of the critical things that our organizations on the ground in communities don't have is the relationships to individual donors with deep pockets. Where is the plan for getting those relationships transferred to our organizations so that what Mark talked about in terms of the 80-20 script can be flipped for real?
Okay, thank you. So those are a lot of questions, and we have only 5 minutes left. So to answer any of those questions, I want to start with Jay, because I know you were about to say something.
So the first piece around specifically around Black church and other sort of spaces. So what we know, and so I think Mark talked about that, or I'm not sure who talked about that earlier. But what we know is that people will most definitely give to their churches and their faith communities and their mosques and all that above all else. So for me, a lot of the work I have done over the years is like also engaging faith communities, not just because like, oh, I think they have responsibility, but also as someone who's a product of Black churches and mosques, like I have a responsibility, and I've been giving my tithes and doing all the stuff. Like, yes, you need to pour into community organizations. So I think it's also, have we challenged our faith communities enough around where they're spending their dollars, right? So if we think about churches that are bringing in like millions of dollars or bringing in all these hundreds of thousands of dollars, and will do business with white cis-run organizations, right? And not pour into Black businesses. How do we make sure that we say, hey, it's actually not acceptable for you to take all this money that we're giving you and to spend it on something outside of our community? How do we actually build up that capacity so we don't have to go to all these bodies that don't necessarily understand our experiences, right? And so I think that's about the membership piece, that we oftentimes do not question the authority, especially of our faith communities, and we need to.
I wanted to answer the question about non-Black communities working together. I'm going to get real radical on that answer. Whiteness is a construct. Whiteness is a construct based on a political agenda to maintain and create power for actually very, very, very few white people, right? So what is white today, like what is white right now here today in 2015 was not white 50 years ago, 100 years ago. White is consolidated around power. What will be white in another 10 years, in another 20 years, will also be based on maintaining that same power and that same political agenda if we don't start to understand that it's a construct. So blackness and how we frame blackness needs to also have a political agenda and mission and value in it beyond how you look. And people can maintain culture, ethnicity, language, all of the pieces of who you are. But when we talk about how to fight back on anti-blackness, it's not going to be from people across the spectrum of blackness running from blackness.
Who wants to follow that up?
I'll go. I'm in. All right. So look. You all know better than me, and you're gonna have, hopefully, an amazing time, like figuring out this moment. So I'm just gonna add in just what I think here at the end, right? So if you want to pivot philanthropy, foundations, right? Write your own check. Drop in $1. Go talk to your pastor or your mosque imam. Have them write a check, right? Show that you have resources and that you prioritize resources, and then talk to foundations about how they're prioritizing theirs, right? Build those individual donors. That's people are power, right? In a system of markets like this, all we have right now is one another, and we should start there, and we should be serious. 2/3 of black dollars go to mosques and churches, right, in this country. That's where most black charitable giving goes. So we should be talking to pastors and to those congregations, asking them to donate to the Let Us Breathe Fund, right? Asking to give to Resource Generation. That's our community, and we should engage our community. Quickly, I just want to reiterate, this is unpopular sometimes, but it's true. Race doesn't exist, racism does, right? And what we are doing is we are trying to deconstruct and end white supremacy. To do that means centering blackness. And that has been done. I want to give respect to many South Asian, Arab, Muslim, Middle Eastern, Jewish leaders who have stood up, right, and allied, and see this need to deconstruct white supremacy as a priority. They understand that liberation for all of us means challenging and deconstructing white supremacy. It's that simple. There is no other way forward, and in a way that maintains our humanity. Lastly, I just want to say this. Have some fun, right? In your moment. Don't take yourself so seriously, right? Don't take yourself so seriously that you begin to stop listening to your community. What I tell people every day is I'm interested in a number of issues. There are a number of issues that I think are a priority, and I recognize that my community is coming out the door because they are tired of being brutalized by the police, right? I'm interested in housing, right? But that's not bringing thousands of my community. It doesn't mean they're not concerned about it, but it's not what they have prioritized in this moment. And for me to ignore what they've prioritized in this moment is arrogance, right? And so we shouldn't be arrogant. We should also be able to find joy in this moment, Because there is no better joy, I promise you, than finding ourselves and waking up. And thank you to all of those people who woke us up.
So I saw somebody stand, I think it was, yeah. So we have 5 minutes left. I've been given the high sign because this panel has been so amazing. So we have time for one more question.
Hi, my name is Bruce, and yes, I am as young as I look. My question is, coming up in the social justice ministry as I did, we were taught that there are 3 types of people. There are people who are always going to be for you. They're always going to be for what you believe in. There are people who are always going to be against you. They're never going to agree with anything that you do. And there are people who are going to be constantly teetering on the fence. And my question is based on, because of some of the conversations I've heard even in this room today, not in this room, but in this space, this forum, there are so many people who are still on the fence and do not realize that they are still on the fence. How do we then identify who's on the fence, help them to pick a side of the fence and find the side of the fence? Because imbalance and, what's the word I can use? Indecisiveness can lead to division. And I want to know, how do we deal with that in organizations and gatherings like this when people still don't know that they're on the fence?
So I don't know how other people on the panel will feel about this, but for myself, when someone's teetering on the fence, I still think of you as the other side of the fence, right? So because my resources are so small, my time is so limited, I have to prioritize people that are on my side of the fence and know where they are, right? And so I think it's great, and people can kind of pontificate and stuff, but we're actually losing lives and bodies now. And so someone else's job, so that's someone else's job. That can't be my job right now today.
I think we often talk about the urgency now, but it's always been urgent. And so just to riff off of you, I think I'm very concerned that there is a crisis of leadership. I'm not saying we don't have enough leaders, but we don't have enough time to train up leaders and to really exchange political analysis, understanding, holding political tension, knowing how to struggle with each other, knowing how to go deep, go wide, and put our bodies on the line and then give love later. It's like these practices and principles that I still believe are based in Black radical tradition, bigger than movement. But I do want to say, like, we are dying. And so there is this urgency of not having the time to wait for people to teeter-totter, but really decide who we are willing to be for each other in the name of this work. I want to bring a quote from an organizing comrade, Southerners on New Ground, that are moving LGBT and CGNC people of color and white allies in the South that say, who are we willing to be transformed in this work? And I do think you have to choose if you're willing to even be transformed.
I'll say that, I mean, I agree with that, and I do think there's a urgency to now, but I do think that good organizing and good movement building is about identifying people who may not be with you yet. And that happens, it doesn't happen in a day, it doesn't happen in a week, it happens over a period of years, maybe even decades. And that is what the power of having an institution, an organization that is rooted in a particular community. They're the only ones that are going to have the ability, the capacity to do that work over time. And so, when we go out there and we're, sort of mobilizing in direct response to something that's happening, yes, we're going to bring out the party faithful. But when it comes to other issues, like, for instance, we organize around education, and the average parent is not sitting around thinking about educational reform, right? And so what's necessary is time spent working with someone, talking with someone, and getting to a place where they understand that their own self-interest and that of all the things that they care and love about are wrapped up in them stepping off of that fence. And you, as an organizer, have to be that catalyst. You're not there to tell them that. You're there to get them to understand and come to that conclusion on their own. And so I think that is in some ways the very definition of good organizing.
Thank you. Unfortunately, we are now out of time. So I want to thank this panel for its fantastic insights and deep knowledge. And then just for me personally, a couple of quick thank yous. I want to thank Columbia University for providing this space today for this wonderful day. I want to thank the staff of the North Star Foundation for their brilliant insights and all their hard work to pull this together. And of course, I have to thank Ejaris Dixon. Can I hear it for Ejaris Dixon?
Y'all are overwhelming me. So I want to thank all of our incredible speakers. We had over 30 speakers. I want to thank everyone who came out. We had over 500 people register for this event. I also want to thank people for we could have kept things real surface level, right? But I think people got really real and really human. And said the things that were vulnerable and said the things that were necessary. And I mean that from our speakers, but I mean that from all of us. I want to thank my team at Vision Change Win Consulting for doing incredible work. I want to thank the North Star Fund for deciding to fund Black-led organizing. And to just say for myself, there was a part of me that kept having what I would call a little bit of an internalized thought about selfishness. I'm like, ooh, it's all these Black plenaries, all these things. And I was like, wait, no, that's an internalized thought. I've just never had the ability to take up this kind of space. So yes, I co-made decisions to create all Black plenaries because I've never been on a Black plenary and I've been organizing for 15 years. We created a space for Black organizers because I've never been in a room with just Black organizers. These are the starting points of the movements and the resources and the leadership that we need. And I am so, so, so inspired and excited to build this alongside you all. So we are closing out. We have a info session that'll be happening in the East Auditorium. So if you are interested in learning more about how to apply to the Let Us Breathe Fund, and you do not just have to be within a 501c3 organization or a nonprofit organization, we have an info session at 6 p.m. We also have an after-party reception that's going to happen in the North Lobby from 6:30 to 7:30, and we want to, party and hang out with you all and have you all get to know each other. There is a cell phone at registration. If you lost your cell phone, some really kind human turned it in because we take care of each other here. And I just want to thank you for your time and your brilliance and your commitment, and to say that this is a beginning. This is not the end of the day. This is the beginning of the work we're doing together.